Okay, we are back in session, and this is the EMS discussion. This is discussion number 2 after our previous one about a month ago. Chief O'Hearn put together some data for us and sent that out. Does everybody have copies of that? So Chief O'Hearn, I'll just turn some time over to you to go over that. Do you have that?
Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of maybe provide some background information. I know Commissioner Crowder is new to the group since last spring when we had our initial conversation about what problems we might be trying to address with the county EMS system. And so I thought it might be beneficial to just send out a concise kind of description of some of the problems or opportunities, you know, some of the issues that we're facing that might help drive the discussion today. That's on kind of the first page, just describing, you know, the long response times that we're addressing in South County versus the sheer call volume in North County. The second page kind of goes into just some brainstorming, certainly not the only options that are available to us, but kind of a starting point. What it might cost to run an ambulance in South County or North County. You know, if we add an ambulance to the system, we really could choose to put that anywhere in the system that it makes sense, depending on what we determine our focus is. The options 2 and options 4 that are just the paramedic only in an SUV to intercept with an ambulance, those really only make sense in South County, and then only if we're able to staff the current ambulances in Lava and Downey and possibly Income with volunteers so that those paramedics would be able to intercept with them on advanced level calls. And so those are somewhat focused on options in South County. And then I just tried to provide you with a little bit of data about the call volume and about the response times that we're seeing to help maybe drive the discussion today. So.
Okay. Thank you. So at this point in time, after looking at that, I thought we'd just kind of open it up to a general discussion as to initial impressions, thoughts on this, and maybe general direction to travel. So, Chief, you want to start us off with general impressions based on this and a direction to potentially travel?
Well, so we haven't, we're just starting kind of the budget process for FY24. I did submit, since the City of Pocatello administers the contract, once we get it approved through you, I did ask for budgetary authority on the city side for up to 6 additional people to accommodate up to an ambulance. I didn't think that we probably would be doing anything more than an ambulance. And certainly we can scale that back as we engage in the budgetary process. If you look at the response times on page 3, and this only includes the response times for the ambulance personnel. It really doesn't encompass Chief Miller's first response in the Chubbuck zones. But the first couple zones are the west zones in North County, and then the east zones in Fourth County. If you kind of look at those top 4, we still have a pretty, what I would call in the acceptable range of response times to Chubbuck. So even though that's where our call volume is increasing quite rapidly, we still are fielding those calls. And so that is we're managing that call volume right now. When you look at South County, it's hard to manage long response times other than to put a unit closer. And then the other issue that we're facing with South County, and this is not just a Bannock County issue, this is really a nationwide issue, is we've had some challenges staffing those ambulances with volunteers. We've had some out of service time lately. We did just finish an EMT class where we put 18 people through the class.
Yeah.
So that was successful. We're hoping that that's going to help us be able to keep those units in service more often. But really, where the conversation was last spring, and I think the point that we're still at now is the logical, with the growth that's going on in South County, even though the sheer call volume isn't there, you just can't account for that long response time without putting a unit closer.
Okay. You got any thoughts?
I think Ryan covered just about everything that I would say. And, to kind of echo what he said about, additional personnel. I feel like that in adding personnel, I think that's a good way to take care of the citizens of Bannock County the best. So, that being said, the reason why I'm here is to just engage in these discussions and try to come up with a solution on our end for making any of this feasible. So we're definitely open to all of the options that aren't on here, and we'll go forward from there.
Chief Miller, any thoughts?
Yeah.
None?
None.
How does that happen? Well, as we sit here and talk, I wonder if initially we don't consider kind of the quick response vehicle parked in McCammon but not staffed except for heavy weekends during the summer, and use that as dipping our toe into how do we improve those response times in South County, and then take that from there and then see what step 2 or phase 2 would be, and phase 3 as we move forward over the course of the couple of years. Because budgetarily, I just don't know if the city of Pocatello and or we would want to afford 6 new guys right now and an ambulance. But I think doing some type of a hybrid model like that has some merit. What's the feasibility of something like that, or the thoughts on something like that?
So would your thought be certain times of the week and maybe almost like a beta test for maybe not quite a peak staffing, 40 hours a week every week? Maybe we're staffing it just with overtime personnel or something. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, I'm just thinking the problems that we had this last summer with Lava specifically going offline was during the summer and the weekends. So what if we had the quick response vehicle in McCammon with just weekend coverage to take the burden off the volunteers during the weekend, and then we use that as our beta test to see, okay, how does this work? So if we could staff it full time, like Friday through Sunday, just as a test, and see if that helps take care of some problems in Chubbuck and the North County end. Again, that's just our beta test, I'm thinking. I don't know. What do you think that relieving the call volume in Lava and South County during the summer would have a little bit of an impact for Chubbuck, so it would give us a good enough model to make some more intelligent decisions going forward?
It would. I think anything we do, right now what we have is an ambulance leaving the North County area to travel to South County just to get a paramedic down there to, if their ambulance is out of service, then obviously we need to send one from North County, and that has become more of a problem. I'm hoping that this class that we just put on is going to help solve that. But anything we do to avoid having to send an entire ambulance down to South County just to transport an ALS provider or a paramedic, it helps the system in North County, making those response times faster, because now more units are in district where we're expecting the call volume to be, and so it has a ripple effect throughout the system. The one issue with a QRU in McCammon would be that depending on the staffing model or the vehicle, if it's just an SUV with a single provider or even with 2 without an ambulance, we really don't have that transport capability, and it relies more and more on keeping that ambulance in service in Lava with volunteers.
So you couldn't have, for lack of a better term, one of those bigger vans as a QRU that could transport? You have to have ambulance size to do that?
We could have one of the vans that kind of, I think those are referred to as like a type 2. We'd need 2 providers, however.
Right, you need 2 bodies, yeah. Yeah, no, I was going down that path, so
Okay.
you could provide the level of service that you need and have what you need.
And maybe the trigger to staff that would be either anticipated call volume or the staffing level of those South County units and whether they're in service or not. That could figure into the decision making.
Because in my head, I'm just kind of playing this out long-term. If we could get by with the type 2 unit in McCammon for now, temporary staffing for now, then as we grow, then we can move that type 2 unit to Chubbuck while we work on getting another ambulance or something out there, put the full-time ambulance, depending on need, back in McCammon to service that, trying to look at how we can move the assets through more efficiently. Does that seem
And
like it?
I think where you're at, kind of with building that tiered system, is how we're gonna have to do it ultimately, right? I mean, we're not gonna be able to just throw a bunch of money out there and personnel out there, right? We've got to kind of build into this system a little bit, kind of see, where the population centers go over the next, 4 or 5 years.
Because if we had the type 2 vehicle in McCammon, and again, let's just arbitrarily say Friday through Sunday, and we transfer it to the Pocatello Chubbuck area Monday through Thursday, that would give us a pretty good, especially if we did it through the summer, that would give us a pretty good telltale of what that would do. Yeah, no?
I think, I'm open to trying something, seeing how it works.
So the only question would then be, where would we put it in Chubbuck? Would we put it in the North Bannock Fire Station? Would we put it in the Chubbuck Fire Station?
We're open for that. Something out there is better than nothing.
And I think that we've started to develop a really good relationship with Chubbuck over forever. We've been working on that relationship. And
My preference would be our station, if that's what you're
Merlin has
asking.
been great to deal with, so.
Okay, so if we put the quick response in Chubbuck during the summer, would it be staffed with your guys or would it be staffed with Chubbuck guys? What's the issues there?
Well, we don't really have, the county right now has really 20, I'll say, line personnel, and the 2 that we added, so it's always been 18, 2 on each of the ambulances, and then we added 2 within the last few years to increase staffing to account for vacations, sick leave, training, when one of those ambulances is short-staffed. So we don't have a large surplus of people. We could talk with both municipalities to see if they would be able to help support that. And then also, we could consider callback or overtime. We did use that for a period of time before we added the 3rd ambulance, which we did in about 2012. And we kind of ran a beta test there and staffed it during peak hours with overtime for a period of time to see what it would do to call volume and response times. And that's when we made the decision to do the levy vote and add that 3rd ambulance about 12 years ago.
So I'm just in my head trying to calculate some costs, which I'm not doing a very good job of, but would we be better off to add 2 bodies instead of the full 6 to try to accommodate this beta test, instead of dipping so much into overtime and putting additional burden on the staffing that we already have?
I think
Could we do it with 2 bodies?
I think we absolutely could, and 2 people would get us. If you staffed an ambulance, it almost, I'm not sure I'm using correct terminology, but we could create a peak demand rover ambulance or something that really we put wherever in the district we felt like the call volume was dictating. Obviously summertime, South County and specifically Lava gets a lot busier, particularly in July and August, between say 4th of July and Labor Day. And that might change in the fall or in the winter. Then maybe it makes sense to put it in Chubbuck. And so I like that idea of being flexible about where we place it. That would cover an ambulance in service about 1/3 of the time, with 2 people. So, and obviously we'd have to make their schedule somewhat regular, so we'd have to kind of
Right.
choose a a time period that we were going to use it. And throughout the system, really, kind of that Wednesday through Saturday, Tuesday through Saturday, that later part of the week really does seem to be the peak demand during the say 10 or noon till 8 or 10 p.m. timeframe.
Thoughts? Anybody?
Do you already have, you're talking about adding, if I understand this right, you're talking about adding a quick response vehicle and 2 persons, is where you're going.
Well, that's, as we're sitting here talking about it, that's kind of what the path that seems to appear to me, is that something mobile with 2 people to staff it, give us, a 6-8 month test period to see if that would work.
And do we already have this quick response vehicle, or do we have to, or are we talking about purchasing another vehicle?
We would have to purchase it. Or do you have one?
Well,
A type 2?
We have some reserve ambulances in our fleet that generally are housed in the Pocatello fire stations, and when the frontline ALS units are out on calls, personnel from Pocatello Fire Department will staff those ambulances and respond anywhere in the county in one of those. We do have what we have used in the past as the transfer ambulance. We're doing fewer interfacility transports now that the private agency is in town. And so there's a potential that we could use that vehicle. So I don't think necessarily we would have to run out and buy a vehicle.
Okay.
We might use something we currently have. As we're adding capacity to the system, it should relieve some of that reserve need. And so using one of those vehicles during this beta test makes a lot of sense.
So the vehicle's there. You think,
Yeah, I think from a vehicle standpoint, we'd be able to implement this.
do you have to modify it or do anything to it, or it's ready to go?
It's ready.
Okay, so there's no additional cost with utilizing that facility, except now you're going to have the gas cost and stuff like that.
Yeah, some operational costs, and then depending on how we staff it, some personnel costs.
And are we talking about then adding 2 people, that we don't already have the people, so we're also talking about 100% financing 2 more people?
I think that would be the most flexibility, otherwise you'd still run into a situation, obviously, I haven't discussed this with Mayor Blatt about using Pocatello staffing to staff a rig. We really haven't had a formal conversation with Chief Miller about using City of Chubbuck personnel. As we enter the summertime, that is our busy vacation usage time and everything, where we're generally closer to minimum staffing, so it could result, even if we were trying to use that, in overtime costs. So I think the safest way to assure staffing for that unit would be to hire 2 people.
Are there people available in Chubbuck that could do this currently, or are we still?
They are not trained to a paramedic level.
Mhm.
We are EMTs.
So you're talking about 2 persons trained to a paramedic level?
That's what we're talking about.
And what's the cost of that per person?
About $120,000 per person. Right here, I've got one paramedic in South County estimated at $109,000.
That includes benefits?
That does include benefits.
It does include it.
It does, yes.
And so that's per person.
Per person, yes.
And do you have, the money for ambulance, I think, comes from, is it a separate levy? Is that how that works?
It is a separate levy.
Okay. And is there money within that we're getting now that could be used for this, or are we talking about having to ask for increased spending?
We do not have, we are maxed on our levy right now.
I'm sorry?
We're maxed on what we're taking right now through the levy. So if the city wants any kind of increase for current operations, this is above that.
And the staffing is owned by Pocatello, just to make sure we know that.
So who's paying for this then? Are the taxpayers of Pocatello paying for the increased?
The Bannock County residents.
Bannock County residents
Or
are,
taxpayers.
because they're, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief, but because they're City of Pocatello employees, the City of Pocatello carries most of the burden, but then they bill the ambulance district for a portion of their salaries and stuff because, or.
Currently, the ambulance district covers 100% of the wages and benefits for
Okay.
those people assigned full-time to the ambulance. So this would be in that same vein, if we, all
Right.
players have a conversation about what they want to do, we could do that same thing, where the ambulance district would fund those 2 additional people.
But we reimburse the city of Pocatello. They're
Yeah.
city of Pocatello employees, we just pay them for the services.
And so, as far as Bannock County goes, we're talking about, let me see if I understand this right. Would we, as Bannock County residents, have the entire cost, which is $218,000? Are the residents of Bannock County, they're the ones that are gonna pay this cost? Or, I guess I'm not quite clear on this relationship with the city of Pocatello.
Basically, we're Bannock County Ambulance District. We have a
Right.
contract with the city of Pocatello.
Right,
City of Pocatello provides the services.
okay.
That's the
So no
easiest
matter
way.
how you do it, Bannock County residents are the ones paying for it?
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay. And so, are there areas in the ambulance budget where there could be some cost savings discovered? We've had every group that's come in here, we start the discussion by telling them we don't want any increase in spending. Look for ways that within your organization, you can move funds from one place to another. Maybe you don't need this, maybe you can use technology to improve efficiencies. Look at the processes, are there improvements that can be made in that level, so as not to add to the spending of the residents of Bannock County. One of the things we talked about was training. Training budgets, in the corporate world at least, that's one of the first things you look at, is training and education, if you need to find some money. And the sheriff's department, I know, does a very good job of having their own people trained to a level that they can do the training internally instead of hiring outside consultants, things of that nature. Do you think there might be areas within the ambulance budget now where you can find some efficiencies to mitigate some of these costs?
We certainly will look to that. One of the things that we're seeing, obviously, we're a very hands-on, response-oriented organization. We have already implemented some of those training strategies that you mentioned. Our people are trained to bring our people up to a certain level. And then, as with the sheriff and other agencies, we do have a lot of mandated training by state to maintain certifications and licensure. I don't know that we could find enough efficiency in the system to fully staff these 2 people.
To partly staff?
Yeah.
Do you think you could partly find some funds?
I will sharpen my pencil and look, but I think we're already running fairly lean. When you look, obviously, and you guys are aware, any organization in public safety is heavily invested in their personnel.
Right.
And that's our most vital resource is our people, and that's the majority of our budget, which leaves a portion for operating, and that's where we'd be looking at those efficiencies, is in that operating side.
Right.
As we see, one thing that I can see, as we see call volume increase, so does medical supplies, fuel, vehicle-related expenses like tires and maintenance, those increase as well. But correspondingly, we should see an increase in our revenue as well. And that is, I think, one of the things about our service is that we are funded not solely on the levy, but we do, for about half the budget, rely on those fees, those user fees. So the levy helps establish a baseline service, and then the fee revenue from the users, the people that are transported by the ambulance service, supplements that and pays the additional component of that, because the levy alone isn't enough to sustain the service.
What percentage of the budget is covered by fees?
I think one is higher than the other, and I believe the
Fees are a
Fees are
little bit
higher.
more,
Yeah.
2.1 million roughly in fees and sales tax, that kind of stuff, and then 2 million in property taxes.
So it's about a 50/50.
Okay, so really what you're saying then is that if we were to go this route, half of that's going to probably be absorbed by fees? Or is
No.
that incorrect?
Well, I would not be comfortable in taking fees up just because we add another ambulance. and I would need to look at collections and where we're at with
Yeah,
that.
we,
We usually take up those dollar amounts a little bit every year, but for every, whatever an ALS call is, you also have the write-off of either the insurance or if it's Medicaid, Medicare, you've got an automatic adjustment. So just because we bill, say, $100 doesn't mean we get $100.
So there may be no change if we do this in the fees.
There will be some.
We
but
would need to
probably
look
not.
at what
I
that projection
don't think we
would be.
could count on it being a large, because we're already servicing those calls in some manner. The issue we're trying to really address is kind of response times and maybe distributing the
Right.
volume among more units. But and calls are slowly increasing, and so I think there will be some increase, but to say that if we put
So
in-
really, the volume's the same, you're just trying to give better service, is what we're
Right,
talking about.
Right, so I don't think it would be a dramatic increase in
Right.
fee revenue.
Right,
That would be driven on just how quickly our call volume overall rises.
right.
The other component of this, which I apologize, I don't have a lot of information yet because the state's still working on their plan for with the Medicare and Medicaid services, is what's called the Ground Emergency Medical Transport. And this is a program through a federal Medicaid program that the state voted to participate in last year. They're still submitting their plan to CMS, and it would help cover the offset that Medicaid does not cover. There's a cost for operating the service, and then the amount that you can recoup for that is X, but the cost of running the service is Y. And so this program is set up to cover that difference, a portion of that difference. And it should be fairly substantial dollars. Obviously, it's dependent on your call volume and your Medicaid payer mix, and the way that the state writes their plan. We're hoping that they will submit that plan this spring. And then sometime in 2025, we'll be able to start collecting revenues, including back to 2023. But we won't collect, our first check probably wouldn't be until the last quarter of 2024.
You have any idea how much we're talking about?
It would be a guess, but agencies that are participating with similar call volumes are, Lewiston is participating in it right now because Washington has it, and they transport from across the river in Clarkston, and it's fairly substantial. The numbers that we're thinking about is probably upwards of maybe $1 million, but that's just a guess, and we haven't really because the plan hasn't been written, we haven't gone through the formal process of having the contractor that's helping write the plan look at individual agencies and their Medicaid payer mix to determine what they might be entitled to under this program. So it's really early to say.
So it's really theoretical at this point.
The dollars will be real, but I would hesitate to say it's going to be X dollars.
But it's
I think it is going to be
possible,
substantial.
it's
for our
possible
system.
we could be bringing in an additional $1 million and starting in
Potentially,
2020.
yeah.
And that's back to 2023?
Yeah,
And
what
that's about $1
happens?
million per year.
That's per year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We only collect $1.8 million in fees,
Yeah.
so that would double or almost double, 50% more in revenue.
This is potentially.
I'm sorry, that's
potentially,
just blowing my
We have a
mind
high
that it's that.
Medicaid payer mix. in
He opened his
Coquel.
mouth.
See, I shouldn't have tried to put a number on it, but. yeah.
Idaho Falls just hired 15 full-time firefighters on a grant with anticipation of this fee paying their wage in the end of 3 years.
Can you
Where's
send
the
me
grant from?
information on
They got a FEMA
I
grant.
really don't have any.
A FEMA
that?
grant.
How'd you get it?
Yeah.
How are you guys doing on getting FEMA grants?
We got a grant. We're doing pretty well. We got one through the ambulance service for some equipment. We have not applied for any of the staffing, the SAFER grants at this point.
We
But we
have
could.
and not been accepted.
We could. I think that this, I don't know if EMS agencies can apply, but since it's through the city of Pocatello, I think we could through the fire department. But we would need to just,
Well, here's the question that keeps going back and forth in my mind that I'm trying to do the math on is, what would it cost us in overtime people to staff it versus hiring 2 new bodies and then the second part of that is more for you, is mentally and, you know, just physically from your standpoint, do you guys have enough to handle the overtime hours if we travel this kind of path? And you can be honest on that, because I'm sure you're fairly taxed as it is, but.
Yeah, so I think that if we can anticipate the overtimes, if we have a set day, we have a higher likelihood of filling that overtime. That being said, I don't know how sustainable that would be, because we're kind of already, you know, we like our people to have a good work-life balance.
Mhm.
And, you know, with the uptick in call volume, we're starting to run more steadily every day, which takes a toll on people. So we like to make sure that we're looking out for their mental health, because that definitely affects their performance at work. And so trying to walk that line, sometimes, you know, we have guys right now that like to take a lot of overtime, and how that's affecting them, they're pretty good at putting on a face, right? So that's something that we try to keep a really close eye on. We have a special team inside of the department that is kind of our support system, and they kind of keep an eye on people. So I can't answer that definitively. I know that in the past, if we're able to plan out that overtime, it's easier for guys to be able to take it. Whereas, you know, like if I said, hey, I need a guy to come in 15 minutes, not quite as easy. So.
Right. But from a cost standpoint, is it cheaper to hire 2 new guys as opposed to taxing the overtime budget? And
That's a question for him.
Okay.
And where do your deployments come in on this?
Yeah.
You're gonna
and-
keep wanting to do deployments, you're not gonna be able to do both, right?
The deployments we've been able to fill pretty well. It would impact our ability to do callback for that. I don't know, deployments is another thing for another day. I hope to get back in front of you here soon to talk about those, both for this year and moving forward as we look to the budget build for FY24. But that is another opportunity to increase revenue to the district.
I have committed that if you put that quick response ambulance, that we will augment it with one of our full-time personnel.
Okay.
So that's a savings to, because I look at it this, as a resident of Chubbuck and also Bannock County, I'm literally paying twice for EMS services.
Right.
Paying for an ambulance, I'm paying for a quick response unit that comes. And so it will lighten up our fire response so that they're not running 24/7 on EMS calls.
Okay.
If I understand that, so you're committed to putting one of these personnel?
In Chubbuck. I don't have the
So-
ability to send them.
Yeah,
south.
so when-
But when it's back here in Chubbuck,
I will augment it with
your one of your
One of
guys
our guys, yeah.
will be on it.
Would that cause you guys any heartburn?
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
initially-
looking at all options to increase service to the district.
Yeah, initially, for us, it's about taking care of our members in the union and taking care of the community. So both of those are right at the top together, so.
Okay. Well, that's why we have you at the table too, so you can be a part of that discussion.
We want to provide the best service that we can to the community. That's what we're committed to.
Well, that's a nice commitment. Thank you. I think that's awesome. Well, not that we're making any decisions today, but I like the direction of potentially using a model for this summer. I don't know if we'll be able to staff it down in mechanics. I don't think they'll be done, but maybe we can toy with something to try it this summer about putting a quick response unit down there during the weekends and then see what, I don't know, we'll have to work out a lot of details, but what do you guys think about using this summer as a test model, if that's possible budget-wise and everything else-wise?
Yeah. Obviously, we'd be operating in the existing budget, and so we Just have to see what our personnel lines are looking like. We didn't really build this into our
No,
picture,
no.
but we're willing to try to stretch and do everything we can within the budget to be innovative and try something and just see how it affects the call volume and the response times in the district.
I'd like to, later on, maybe you and I can have a conversation about some of the grant opportunities that might be out there. That might be a partial solution to this.
For personnel or for
For
equipment?
personnel. Maybe not, but I'd like to have that conversation.
Yeah. The only one I know of is that SAFER grant. And that's usually, it's through FEMA and they'll cover the costs. I'd have to look at how it applies to EMS, but I think where we're a fire-based system,
Mhm.
I believe Idaho Falls obviously has done it. They're a similar system to us that would be able to do that. And the Department of Homeland Security covers the wages of those personnel, I believe, for the first 3 years, and then you transition into the local agency picking up those costs.
And we don't have that currently.
We have not applied for a SAFER grant in the past. And as Chief Miller said, Idaho Falls was just awarded one, and I think they hired 12 under the SAFER grant, and then an additional 3, because they just had a 15-person academy. And they have a very similar system to ours.
Okay.
Jason, you got any thoughts?
Well, it's good to look at it. It's going to be, how to fund it is always the question.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Christie, you got any thoughts? Well, if you guys are comfortable with that, why don't you put together some basic numbers on what that would potentially look like? And then we can meet back here again in another 3 or 4 weeks and be prepared to make a decision.
This will involve the city, though. So
Correct.
the city's
That-
going to have to be on board with the increased budget,
Correct.
assuming, now, if Bannock County can come up with the funding, then it should be an easy ask because we'll be paying for it. But if,
You mean in the current fiscal year? Or moving forward?
yeah,
Well,
because that's
again,
what
we
Commissioner Huff would like, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
we don't know, right now, we're just talking hypothetical because we don't have anything, but if you can do some more data gathering and we meet back here in 2 or 3 weeks with that as a general direction potentially, then we can know what questions to ask and what decisions to make. How close are we with McCam and Braden to get that all wrapped up? And
I haven't talked to Carlene recently. Do you have any idea on that, John, with your negotiations and the MOU?
I think we're coming along okay. I'll be talking to her today or tomorrow, I imagine.
Okay, so we should have that wrapped up in the next couple of weeks, so by the time we meet, we'll have a better time frame of when McCammon could be online, so to speak, and go from there.
Has she indicated whether that bay would be done this summer?
I don't think I'm ready to comment on that at this time.
Okay.
I don't know if I would plan on it for this year, but,
Yeah, run it out of lava this summer.
okay. Chief Miller, any other thoughts?
I will say, working with volunteers, it is becoming increasingly more difficult to find good quality. People have more discretionary funds. They commit for a little while and then it starts interfering with soccer practices and vacations and call volume increases and it wasn't what they signed on for. I found it very difficult every time to replace a good, solid pay call person with a replacement for that. So I don't want to say that it's broken, but it is becoming more and more difficult to replace good quality volunteers.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
It's definitely a challenge that we're seeing on our side for South County.
Okay. Well, if everybody's kind of comfortable with that general direction, at least as something to discuss on our next meeting, then let's move in that direction and
So put together some numbers for what it might cost to staff an ambulance
just kind of what we talked about, just, you know, if we could put something down in South County during the summer, that Friday through Sunday, and that'll give us some idea of, then can we roll it into Chubbuck the rest of the week and do something? Does that make sense? Sure about that?
That's basically a full-time ambulance. So,
I'll help him.
yeah,
But,
we'll put our thinking caps together.
I have some crayons.
okay, all right, well, if you got crayons, that'll
I'm
work.
good at
then.
drawing things.
Okay, thank you, everybody, appreciate it, and we are adjourned until, what, 1:30? I think, 1:30.
Is it 1:30?
Yeah, 1:30.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.